The notary slid the folder across the table without looking at me. My son had his hand resting on top of it before it even stopped moving. I picked up my tea. It had gone cold. I drank it anyway. "Mom, we just need your signature on 3 pages. That's it. 15 minutes and we're done." He smiled the way he used to smile when he wanted something as a boy. Wide, patient, certain I would give in. "Then you can go home and rest. I know this has all been a lot." I nodded. I said nothing. The notary, a young woman with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, looked between us, then back down at her papers. Outside the window of that little office on Yonge Street, Toronto was doing what Toronto does in November. Gray sky. People walking fast with their chins tucked. A streetcar going by, slow and orange and ordinary, like it had no idea what was happening inside this room. I had been sitting in that chair for 20 minutes already. My son had been talking for most of them. I thought about the drive over, how he had picked me up himself, rare enough that I noticed, how he had carried my coat to the car, how he had turned the heat on before I sat down, which he never does because he runs warm, and I always have to ask. Small kindnesses, arranged like furniture before a showing. I had noticed all of it. I had been noticing things for 2 years. Let me go back, because this story doesn't start in that office. It starts much earlier, in a way that I didn't understand until I was already in the middle of it. My husband Gerald passed away in the spring of 2021. 38 years we were married. He was a civil engineer, careful with money the way careful people are. Not miserly, just intentional. We had the house in Oakville, a cottage up near Parry Sound, and enough in registered accounts to see me through comfortably. Gerald had made sure of that. He spent the last year of his life making sure of that. What he could not plan for was our son Richard. Richard is 51 years old. He works in commercial real estate. He is successful. Genuinely successful, not in the way people say it, to be polite, but actually, he has a beautiful home in Mississauga. His wife drives a car that costs more than my first house. They take the children to Costa Rica every March. I am proud of him. I have always been proud of him. I want to say that clearly because what I am about to tell you is not a story about a bad person. It is a story about what money does to people, even good people, even people you love. It started with the cottage. 6 months after Gerald died, Richard called and said he thought it might be time to think about the cottage. The upkeep was a lot, he said. The drive was a lot, he said. Did I really want to be managing a property in Parry Sound by myself? His voice was kind. It was reasonable. He wasn't wrong that the upkeep was significant. I said I wanted to keep it for another summer. He said, of course. The following spring, he brought it up again. This time he mentioned that his accountant had looked at the numbers and the carrying costs were not nothing. And had I thought about what Gerald would have wanted? And wasn't it better to make decisions from a position of strength rather than wait until I had to? I said I wanted another summer. He stopped asking about the cottage after that. He started asking about other things instead. Had I thought about whether the Oakville house was too large for one person? Had I considered that the real estate market was unpredictable and that locking in now might be wiser than waiting? Had I thought about what a seniors community might offer? Not a nursing home, he always said that quickly. Not a nursing home, but one of the newer ones, the nice ones, the ones with the dining rooms and the walking paths. Each conversation was careful. Each one alone was reasonable. Together they made a sound I recognized only gradually, the way you don't notice a room getting colder until you realize you've been cold for a long time. I was 67 years old. I was healthy. I walked 40 minutes every morning. I had lunch with friends on Thursdays. I read. I cooked. I drove myself everywhere I needed to go. I was not confused. I was not failing. But somewhere in those 2 years of gentle, reasonable conversations, I had begun to feel like I was already gone, like I was being managed toward an ending that had been decided without me. That is a particular kind of loneliness. I don't have another word for it. The appointment with the notary had been Richard's idea. He said we needed to update the estate documents, which was true, they were several years old. He said he had found someone efficient and affordable. He said he would take care of everything. I just needed to show up and sign. I had agreed. And then, 2 weeks before the appointment, I had called my own lawyer. Her name is Patricia. She has handled my affairs since 1998. I had not spoken to her since Gerald's probate was finalized, but she picked up the phone like no time had passed, and when I told her what had been happening, all of it, from the cottage conversations to the seniors' community brochures Richard had left on my kitchen counter, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Have you read what you're being asked to sign?" I said Richard had described it as routine updates. She said, "I'd like to see the documents before you sign anything." I sent them to her that afternoon. She called me back the next morning. Her voice was measured, which is how I knew she was being careful with me. The documents were not routine updates, what Richard had prepared, through his own lawyer, not through Patricia, though he had not mentioned that detail, would have transferred power of attorney over my finances and property to Richard, effective immediately upon signing. It would have given him authority to make decisions about my primary residence. It included language about my current capacity that Patricia said was unusual and, in her opinion, unnecessary for someone in my situation. It was not illegal. That is the part that took me the longest to sit with. None of it was illegal. It was just a door being opened and me being guided through it, and the door closing behind me. I asked Patricia what I should do. She said, "What do you want to do?" I thought about that for a long time. Longer than she probably expected because she waited without saying anything. I said, "I want to keep what is mine." She said, "Then let's do that properly." Over the next 2 weeks we worked. Patricia drafted a new power of attorney, one I understood completely, one that named my daughter-in-law's sister, a woman I trust and who has no financial stake in my estate, as my designated attorney if I were ever incapacitated. She helped me establish a revocable living trust for the house and the remaining cottage, structured so that the assets were protected and the distribution was clearly documented according to my wishes. She walked me through every line. She explained every term. She did not rush me. I signed those documents on a Wednesday morning in Patricia's office with 2 witnesses and a cup of good coffee. The following Tuesday, I let Richard drive me to the notary. I want to tell you what that room felt like because I think it matters. It was a small office, beige carpet, a fake plant in the corner, one of those motivational prints on the wall that says something about excellence. The notary was young enough to be my granddaughter. She had explained each page to me quickly, in the practiced way of someone who does this 20 times a week and doesn't expect questions. Richard sat beside me, not across from me, which might have felt like opposition. Beside me, close, warm, like we were in this together. He had brought me a coffee from the Tim Hortons downstairs, double, the way I've taken it for 30 years. He remembered. That detail had almost undone me on the drive over because it reminded me that this was still my son, that love and harm can live in the same person without either of them being a lie. The folder was in front of me. 3 pages. Blue flag stickers on the signature lines. I had my handbag on my lap. Inside, it was a plain manila envelope. Richard said, "Mom, we just need you to sign. Everything's in order," I said. "I know." I opened my handbag. I took out the envelope. I set it on the table between us. He looked at it, then at me. "What's that?" "Something I've already taken care of," I said, "a few weeks ago." The notary looked between us. She had the careful stillness of someone who has learned to be a very good witness. Richard picked up the envelope. He opened it slowly enough that I could see him reading the heading on the first page. I watched his face. I have been watching that face for 51 years. I saw the moment he understood. He set the papers down. He said, "You went and did this without talking to me." I said, "Yes, Mom." He said my name again, differently this time. Not the patient, managing tone from earlier, something rawer. "Mom, I was trying to help you." "I know you were," I said. And I meant it. I believe, even now, that some part of him meant it. But this is my home, Richard, my accounts, my name on those papers. Gerald left those things to me to manage, not to be managed. He was quiet for a while. The notary was doing the thing where you look at your own documents very carefully so that you are not involved in the conversation happening in front of you. "So what does this mean?" Richard finally said. "It means I've made my arrangements. They're done. They're legal." Patricia filed copies with my financial institutions this morning. I picked up my coffee. It was still warm. "It means we can go to lunch if you'd like, or we can go home, but there's nothing left to sign here." He looked at the notary. She gave a small, professional nod that confirmed she had nothing further to offer him. He stood up. He put on his coat. He held the door open for me because that is how he was raised, and old habits don't break easily even when everything else is breaking around them. We did not go to lunch. The drive back to my house was quiet, not a peaceful quiet. The other kind. He pulled into my driveway and left the car running, the way you do when you're not planning to come in. "I just want you to be taken care of," he said, looking straight ahead. "I am taken care of," I said. "I'm taking care of myself. That's different." I got out. I thanked him for the drive. I meant that too. I stood on my front step and watched his car go down the street and turn the corner. The neighbor's maple tree had lost most of its leaves and the branches were bare against that November sky. A squirrel went across the lawn like it had somewhere important to be. I went inside and stood in my kitchen for a moment, just stood there in the quiet that has been mine and no one else's for 3.5 years. Gerald's coffee mug is still on the shelf above the kettle. I don't use it. I just like that it's there. I made myself tea. Real tea this time, hot enough the way I like it. I sat in my chair by the back window where you can see the garden, or what's left of it at this point in the year. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a victory in the way people might imagine when they hear a story like this. I didn't feel righteous or vindicated or any of the sharp, clean feelings that revenge stories are supposed to end with. What I felt was steady, like something that had been shifting under me for a long time had finally found its footing again. I am 68 years old now. I live in my own house, in my own name. The cottage will go to my grandchildren someday in a trust that I designed according to my own wishes. My finances are managed by a fee-only advisor who reports to me directly. Patricia reviews my documents every 18 months. Richard and I are still in contact. It is careful at the moment. We have dinner with the grandchildren once a month, and we talk around the things we are not yet ready to talk about. I don't know if that will change. I hope it does. I am his mother and I love him, and those are facts that don't depend on any of the rest of it. But I will tell you this, and I tell you because I think some of you listening may be sitting in your own chairs right now, having your own quiet version of this story. Nobody tells you, when you are young, that getting older sometimes means people stop asking you what you want and start deciding for you. Not all at once, not obviously, just gradually, in reasonable-sounding increments, the way you don't notice the tide going out until you look down and you're standing on dry ground. And nobody tells you that you are allowed to say, "Not yet, not like this, not without me." You are allowed to call your own lawyer. You are allowed to understand every page before you sign it. You are allowed to make your own arrangements, in your own time, according to your own judgment. Because your judgment did not expire. It does not have an expiry date. Gerald knew that about me. He built an estate with me in it at the center of it, not around the edges. I had forgotten that. Somewhere in those 2 years of gentle conversations, the folder on the notary's desk reminded me. I didn't sign those papers. I already had my own. My tea is gone now. The garden is very still out there. There's a cardinal on the fence, the male, the red one, and he's just sitting there like he owns the whole yard. And honestly, good for him. If you're watching this and you have someone in your life who has been having very reasonable conversations with you lately, I just want you to remember something. Reasonable is not the same as right. Patient is not the same as trustworthy. And love, real love, does not need to decide anything in a hurry. Take your time. Call your own person. Read every page. You've earned the right to be in that room on your own terms. I promise you, you have. I've thought a lot about what happened in that beige little office on Yonge Street. Not with bitterness. I want to be clear about that. But with the kind of slow, honest attention you give to something after the urgency of it has passed, and you can finally see the whole shape of it. What Richard didn't come from nowhere. That's the part people don't always want to say out loud, but I think it's the most important part. The choices we make toward other people, even the ones that hurt them, grow out of something. Out of fear, usually. Out of a story we've told ourselves so many times it starts to feel like fact. Richard told himself, I was becoming someone who needed managing. And once a person decides that about you, every piece of evidence gets sorted into that pile. You forget your keys once and it's a sign. You hesitate before answering and it's a symptom. It stops being about you at all. It becomes about the story. I don't say that to excuse what happened. I say it because understanding it was part of how I got through it without losing myself in the anger of it. Because I could have been angry. There were mornings in those 2 years of reasonable conversations where I sat with my tea and felt something so close to fury that it frightened me a little. My husband had spent the last year of his life making sure I would be all right. He had been careful and deliberate and loving about it. And here was his son, our son, undoing that care, page by careful page, with the best of intentions and the worst of timing. But here is what I've come to understand, and what I think Gerald knew long before I did. Your security is only as real as your understanding of it. It is not enough to have things put in your name. You have to know what that means. You have to stay in the room. You have to be the one who calls the lawyer, reads the documents, asks the questions that feel embarrassing to ask. Nobody is going to protect what's yours with the same attention that you will. That is not cynicism. That is just the plain truth of things. I called Patricia because something in me had not yet agreed to disappear. That instinct, that small, stubborn refusal, was the beginning of everything that followed. Not the meeting with the notary, not the envelope in my purse. Just that phone call, made quietly on a Tuesday afternoon while the kettle was boiling. One decision to stay present in my own life. Richard is a good man navigating something he didn't fully understand about himself. I believe that. We are still finding our way back to each other. Slowly, the way you do when something real has been said between people, and the air needs time to settle. I am not waiting for an apology. I am not keeping score. I am just living in my house, tending what is mine, and leaving the door unlocked in case he wants to come back as himself rather than as someone's plan. That is enough for me. More than enough. If there is anything I would want someone to take from all of this, it's simply this. Do not wait until someone else is making decisions for you to decide what you want. The time to understand your own affairs is before anyone questions your ability to understand them. Not because you owe anyone that proof, you don't, but because that knowledge belongs to you. It is a form of self-respect. And self-respect, I found, is the one thing that nobody can sign away on your behalf. Not without your signature. Not if you know what you're holding.